Today we're talking about how to teach your kids to budget. Let's get started. Budgeting is a simple concept that can be difficult in practice. We all know the basics of budgeting, but most people don't follow one. And I mean that literally. According to a Gallup poll, most people do not follow a budget. That surprises me because there's so many free tools and resources to make budgeting easier than ever. So how many people actually budget? Around 32% of Americans. And it's around that same percentage of Americans that have a long-term plan for their finances. Coincidence? But before we can teach budgeting to our kids, we have to understand the basics ourselves, and it's actually really easy to just get the basics. And if we want our kids to listen to us whenever we teach them how to budget, we better make sure that we're following one. If we haven't met yet, my name is Kalen. I'm the founder of Freedom Sprout, where we talk about raising intentional children and living intentional lives. If that interests you, please hit the subscribe button below. Now let's talk budgeting basics. Starting a budget is easy, and I can break it down into 5 quick steps before we start talking about how to teach kids about budgeting. Number 1, track your expenses and income for a month. Number 2, create the categories that fit your life. Number 3, set some short-term and some long-term financial goals. Number 4, cut certain areas to make those financial goals possible. And number 5, adjust accordingly over time. I think the most important step out of those 5 is the last one, because step 5 is what builds the budgeting habit. The most common budget killer I see on a constant basis as a financial coach is unexpected expenses. I'll watch someone track all their expenses and track their spending and set a budget and start doing it all the way up until some large unexpected expense comes in and ruins everything, and then they stop budgeting forever sometimes. It happens whenever people blow one of the categories or they spend way too much in a certain area and they think that the budget's not working, so they just give up on it, and they don't realize that budgets are a living thing and you have to keep molding them. Our lives don't constantly stay the same, so we shouldn't expect our budget to constantly stay the same. So these are all things kids need to know before they start trying to create their own budget. But first, we have to meet kids where they're at. A 5-year-old isn't going to understand anything I've said before right now in this video. So let's start young. Budgeting for ages 3 to 5. Ages 3 to 5 is probably the youngest age that we've implemented the give, save, spend jars that are popular, I'm sure you've heard about. But the emphasis is on the give and the spend. At this age, kids can start to understand the importance of giving, but they also need to be spending their own money so they can see the impact in their life. Whenever they spend a certain amount of money on a certain thing, they can see the money come in and they see the money go out when they buy something. And they can start learning what that feels like to spend money, to spend their own money, and to have less money now after spending it. If you have a super gracious child who wants to give all kinds of money, like 100% of their money, that's great, and you should encourage their giving, but it's also important to balance them out, to balance the spending and the giving and ultimately the savings as well. So at age 3 to 5, I would say a 10% savings is reasonable with whatever their income is, whatever their allowance or commission is. For giving and spending, you can do anywhere from 10 to 80% respectively, or you can equal out the remaining 90% after that 10% savings to where they give 45% and spend 45%. At this age, when they're 3 to 5, it's good to make everything visual. So get a big clear jar, use actual dollar bills, and let them see it filling up so they can see it visually before they start going into the world of automation and technology where you can't physically see any of your money. With their giving, let them physically give that dollar or the check or whatever, the tithe to your church or the giving to a local charity. Let them physically give that so they can literally see it happening. And the same goes for making purchases. They need to literally see that purchase being made, so even if it takes a little extra time, it's important that they're the ones giving the cash to the cashier. Budgeting for ages 6 to 11. By this age, you're able to tell if your child is more of a saver or a spender. You can start to encourage them to do a little bit more of whichever one feels less natural. If you don't, it could lead to a bad spending habit or a money hoarding problem, depending on if they're a spender or a saver. They need that balance. At age 6 to 11, it's important to start putting a little more emphasis on saving and to go ahead and nail down the specific percentage that your child plans to save. At this age, they're old enough to understand the basic idea of saving money up and then spending it to buy something, but it's likely that they're not quite disciplined enough yet to save for a really large purchase. So it's time to let them save for something big, and it could be anything, preferably a few $100s, and then let them buy the thing. And when they're between 6 and 11, if they want to start to adjust their percentages in general, is a good time to let them. If they have 10% in the give and they want to increase that, or if they want to increase their savings, whatever the case, talk them through the jars and why their percentages are what they are. Budgeting for ages 12 to 14. When they're in that 12 to 14 range, it's time for the car conversation. Before now, you should already have an idea of whether they're going to be buying their own car, or you're buying them a car, or you're going to split it with them, or you're going to match their savings, or whatever you're going to do. You should have an idea of how their car buying is going to work by the time they hit that 12 to 14 range. But they need to know the plan so they can do their part. I'll link a guide below that I did on kids and cars and making all of those decisions, and I'm probably going to do a video about it soon anyways, but just make sure by that 12 to 14 you have that idea in your head of how the car buying is going to work. If you've been letting them spend their own money up until now, they should have an idea and be accustomed to how spending works, and they should be able to know what the effects of spending are because they've felt them already. And at this point they really need to have those give, save, spend jars nailed down as to what percentages they're putting in each jar, and generally how they're doing their spending and their giving and their saving. So from here, because they already have an idea of spending and how it feels and how it works, and the giving and the saving, budgeting should start to become natural to them. Now for the age whenever they think that they are already adults. Budgeting for ages 15 to 18. At this age, your kids should start seeing some of their own expenses. Things like car insurance or maybe a cell phone payment. But now that they're in their later teens, it's time to have the debt talk. Like I always say, the goal at Freedom Sprout is to teach kids all these financial concepts so we won't be showing them how to dig their way out of debt later, but you do need to have the conversation about debt before they get to college and get their first credit card offer. It's also time to start showing them the family finances, showing them your budget. Don't hide your finances from them because that's the best teaching tool you have for your kids. If you've made financial mistakes, let them learn from your mistakes. If you've been successful with finances, let them learn from your success story. And at ages 15 to 18, it's time to actually let your kids make their first budget. Let them set their own budget, but it should be a simple version of what your family budget looks like. It would just include the things that only apply to your teen, like eating out, car insurance, cell phone payment, entertainment, things like that. At age 15 to 18, if you're a Dave Ramsey fan, it would be a good time to introduce them to the baby steps. So step 1 is having $1,000 emergency fund. Step 2 is digging out of debt. Hopefully they won't have to deal with that step. And then step 3 is having that fully funded 3 to 6 month living expenses emergency fund. And realistically, your kids could go all the way through the end of step 3 before they move out of your house. And then they can continue to learn the baby steps and to climb through them if you want to go that route. It's just, this is the best time to introduce the baby steps if you agree with them. Ages 15 to 18 is also the time to introduce investing to your kids. So you have the give, save, spend jars, which probably aren't actual jars anymore, but now it's time to add the grow jar. There's a lot of stuff your kids need to understand at age 15 to 18 before they move out. So I'll put a video that I did on 11 really important financial concepts for your kids to know before they leave home, but just make sure you're teaching them the important things and continuing on from the giving, saving, spending into the investing, and you're teaching them the dangers of debt. From understanding insurance to retirement plans to the main point of this video, budgeting, your kids need to understand all these concepts before they move out and they're on their own. If they've spent their entire life learning all these financial concepts and learning about budgeting and they know about it before they move out, they're going to be way ahead of everyone else whenever they actually get to college or go into the workforce. So before they leave home, create a sample budget with them, put all the expenses that they have now and all the expenses that they could expect to have whenever they get into college or whichever path they're choosing, and let them live this budget out day to day so they can start getting the idea and they can start building the habit of budgeting. If your kids grow up knowing all this stuff, they're never going to have those difficult financial problems because they're going to be prepared for anything. So that's it for budgeting. Share your comments and questions below. I would like to hear how you do it, how you teach your kids about budgeting, if you teach your kids about budgeting. If you agree or disagree with anything, share comments below. Before you go, please subscribe to get more videos on money, minimalism, and our travel journey around the world. Check out my new book, Intentional Children. There's an entire chapter about budgeting. I'll put a link to that below. That's all for today. I will see you next week.